Welcome to Art Collector's Pull Focus series. I'm Bryony Downs, and today I'm speaking with artist Heidi Melamed. Welcome, Heidi.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Pleasure. Today we'll be taking a closer look at a work from Heidi's Remnant series. I'm in my home on the Winnina country in Hobart, and Heidi, where are you joining us from today?
I am in Sydney.
Lovely.
Thank you for having me.
So in the Remnant series, you have used common art making materials in really interesting and unconventional ways. Instead of drawing with coloured pencils, you've used pencil sharpenings to create intricate repeating patterns that fan out across your chosen surface. And the effect is completely mesmerising, but I can imagine these works take a lot of patience and a very steady hand to create. In the work that we're looking at today, you've covered a plywood surface with millions of tiny shavings from the inner leads of coloured pencils, which creates a beautifully textured abstract colour work. Can you tell me a little bit about what goes into making a work like this as I pull the image up so everybody can see?
Okay, well, I'll just give you a little background as to how this process came around for me, because I was sharpening a series of old pencil crayons and realized that I had this pile of pencil shavings that I was just about to throw into the trash, and suddenly thought, oh my goodness, this could make a fabulous source of color, a new color, and using a new material that I actually hadn't thought of using at any time before.
Yeah.
So the first one of these series I made, and I'm going to call them vertexes because that's the title of the collection that I've named it. I individually glued the pencil shaving onto the board, which took me forever and a day. Yeah. And and then suddenly something evolved, and I found the lead, this pure color lead. So initially I hadn't intended to use the lead, I just intended to use the pencil sharpenings.
Right, yep.
So I then had this long process that I had to get through to separate the lead from the shavings, because when I sharpened the pencils, the lead fell to the bottom. So when I was sticking the sharpenings down the lead, I discovered at the bottom, quite by surprise. It was an accidental discovery. Yeah. And but to separate the color from the lead required a process of sifting and sieving through different coarse and fine sieves. So there were, and in the end, after this lengthy process, I had a whole lot of series of different pots of colors. And so I then made a second artwork, which is this one that we're looking at, which is purely just the lead with none of the wood shavings. And so that's how the using that lead actually came about. It was quite by accident, and it was a beautiful accidental find. So now just let me regroup. And what was your actual question, so that I can?
You've actually answered it. I was just asking you about the making process and how a work like this kind of comes to be. I'm really amazed that it's a sifting process, and that you actually sift the coloured lead through something to get those tiny pieces. So how long would a work like this actually take to make, like including like the collection process of the materials?
I don't know, maybe 40 hours or so. I started calculating on the side, exactly how many hours it was taking me. And then I lost track because it was just taking me far too long. Yeah. When I actually place these colors onto the board, it's a matter of gluing sections And then I found myself literally painting with the glue and then pouring and sprinkling these color lead in sections of the glue. There was no preconceived idea of where the glue and the color was going to start and end. And then, of course, when I lift the board up, there's a whole lot of lead that falls off the board that hasn't stuck onto the glue. And then you get a mixing of color at the bottom of on the tabletop, which is then, mixed to make another color. So I actually found myself literally painting with this color and mixing colors that I hadn't actually started using. So it was a bit like mixing acrylic paints, putting a little bit of yellow and putting a little bit of orange and getting a new colors. Also, the texture of the lead, as I may have mentioned, some of the lead is quite coarse and some of the lead is quite fine. So you get this beautiful textured surface of, rough and smooth, and that's where the whole idea of the light comes into play, because the textures and the light play off against one another.
That was actually something I wanted to ask you about, was the role of light in these works, because light is something that you've used before in your earlier works, particularly with some works using perspex and paint. And it's almost like in this work that the shavings are activated by light in their surrounds. In this case, what draws you to wanting to catch the light in your work?
I love the way that you've asked me, how do I catch the light? Because I'd never thought of it that way. So it's, yes, it's interesting. The light catches the texture and the raised surface, but it wasn't something that I'd literally set out to do. The way that I paint with light is really about using, in my perspex works, external light sources. So with my perspex works, it's all about the light, how it's refracted and reflected, how light is seen in unexpected places. These works are a little bit more intimate. They don't rely on external light sources. It's really how I've been able to capture the light within the lead itself. And in some cases, I've used pencils that are metallic. Some of them are actually have a little bit of glitter in them, which always enhance that light refracting quality. Yeah. So it's about the difference in lead. Also, amazingly, some pencils, different pencil crayons, depending on where they bought and who's made them, the quality, I suppose, of the lead and the way that they produced are all different. So that also adds to the difference in the texture and the way that the light bounces off them. So all of those sort of attributes would allow for the light to be, for the viewer to see it differently.
So what is the significance of the shape of the entire work, the ovoid shape?
Well, the parabola is a shape that dominates my practice. I can't actually give you a specific reason as to why, except that it's different from a square and it's different from a circle. And so this parabolic shape appears in different forms. And in this particular shape, which in the series which I've called vertex, as I've already said, it's two parabolic halves that have come together to form this shape. And the vertex is at the very top of the painting where the lines intersect. And it's kind of like the wings of a butterfly, I suppose. It could be.
Yep, I can see that. So looping back to what we were talking about before about the light, would you say there are any other artists that are working with light who have influenced your practice in a particular way?
Mary Corse, an American light artist, she spent her life exploring the use of light in her work. She, in the 1960s, used to make perspex, plastic fluorescent lights boxes, but she also used microspheres, which she included, or microbeads, which she included in acrylic paint onto her canvases. And they're large pieces that viewer is intended to sort of like walk past and notice this visual tension within the paint. And it's seen from one angle, it's seen completely differently when you walk past it to another angle. So in a way, what I'm trying to do is exactly what she's done, is to incorporate the light into and onto the surface of my paintings. And the viewer is able to see it by walking around it and having an interaction with the work, seeing it from different angles, and then having this conversation.
Right. So that kind of relates to like what you were saying before too, about like how paintings can exist at different moments as well. That's really interesting. In your artist statement for this exhibition, you mentioned that the shapes of your work are sort of similar to portals. And I was wondering, in what way do you imagine them to be portals, and where would they take us to?
Well, these are imaginary spaces. And if we can imagine, they can take us anywhere. They can take us to a desert landscape. They can take us in the air where we can see an aerial view of the landscape, the rivers, the land, the mapping of it, giving us a sense of place. It can take us into space. We can see color bursts in space. And we can close our eyes. I do when I close my eyes anyway. I see paintings of color and bursts of color. So maybe it can take you there. And wherever it takes you, I hope that it's a place of joy, because ultimately my work is about the joy of seeing. And I hope that it can inspire and certainly give a person or the viewer that sense of joy.
It absolutely does. That's wonderful. Well, we might leave it there, Heidi. Thank you so much for chatting with us today about your beautiful work. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Bryony. Thank you so much for having me again.
Thank you.